human civilization has known many empires. They differed in size, ideology, culture, and longevity. But all empires, without exception, share one common trait: they all collapsed. When Putin decided to restore his pseudo-empire, he gave Russia a fatal injection.
Imagine a situation in which a certain republic, at some point in the past, became part of the Soviet Union. During this process, not only did the republic join the Union, but it also received a large amount of land territory that had traditionally belonged to Russia and was considered an important part of Russian history. These lands were recognized as having significant historical and cultural value for the Russian people. Well, at the very least, it should have left with what it came with.
Putin attacked Ukraine in order to become an emperor. But in the end, this insane act triggered an irreversible revolutionary reaction in the country. Now the favorite phrase of the average Russian, "we can do it again," has taken on a completely different meaning. Now, in Russia, people want to repeat the revolution of 1917.
We're not threatening, we're just saying, we've been through half the world with you, and if necessary, we'll do it again.
Putin's inner circle, without any embarrassment, is molding him into a Tsar. And not a 21st century monarch like in Britain or the Netherlands, but a true medieval satrap, with all those icons, endless petitions, and court jesters.
Do you actually understand what a Tsar is?
Well?
In Russia, any government official is a Tsar. When someone tries to desacralize the Tsar or Empress, it's a blow to Russian statehood. It doesn't matter if it's about the Soviet Union or the imperial period, or about today, you see. This is the sovereign father. This is the person who stands.
This is what is called the sacralization of power.
But if there is a Tsar, there will always be those who want to overthrow him. You can't cheat the law of nature. As long as the tyrant wins wars, everyone loves him. But as soon as he fails, everyone immediately starts sharpening their knives. And in Ukraine, Putin didn't just fail, he crashed and burned, spreading the mess all over the place. Just like 100 years ago, Russia is waging a long, bloody war it cannot win. Putin promised his population, pumped up with imperial nonsense, a short victorious war and a parade on Kreshchatik. But when the war turned out to be neither short nor victorious, and Russia was represented at the parade in central Kyiv by destroyed and burned out equipment, Russian Z supporters, chauvinists, Nazis, and just plain brainwashed thugs were deeply disappointed.
The main problem here is that expectations don't quite match reality.
What do you mean?
Well, we expected that we would crush the enemy quickly, easily, effortlessly, in a week, maybe, or at most, in a month. And even then, I thought that would be a long time, and that the territories in our hands would be completely different from what they are now.
They thought they'd ride their shoulder cords all the way to the English Channel, or at the very least, start seizing businesses and apartments in Lviv. Just like they did in Donbass.
Hey man! Hello, Gina! Hello! Ulanune! Gina! Yes, the course!
But reality turned out to be harsh. The shoulder cords were already scorched back in Hostomel, and the number of Z fighters began to drop sharply. Disappointment peaked after the bloody capture of Bakhmut. The Kremlin presented it as if it were the new capture of Berlin. But the Z community and the army were so shocked and demoralized by the losses that a real armed uprising broke out. Prigozhin gathered the remnants of his Wagner group and declared that he would no longer fight this way, then led his army toward Moscow.
We came here, we wanted to get the chief of the general staff and resolve this. Until they show up, we will stay here. We are blocking the city of Rostov and heading to Moscow.
Notably, the rebels were greeted by Russians with flowers in the streets. No one offered them any resistance. Everyone was happy that the bold guy was going to overthrow the pale one. Prigozhin almost made it to Moscow, and the only reason he didn't take the Kremlin was not because he couldn't, but because the fool decided to negotiate with Putin. We all remember how it ended, just like in the TV series Nosedive.
Surely the question is hanging in the air, what happened to the company's leadership and so on. But of course, we know about the plane crash.
That was only a rehearsal for the real revolution, just like in 1905. But now the time has come for a real uprising, and the rebels will no longer negotiate with the pseudo-Tsar. In the 4th year of the full-scale war, even the most fanatical jingoists have begun openly calling for armed struggle against the regime. The main trigger was the peace talks in Istanbul. The Russians started screaming about a backroom deal and betrayal. After all, they had been promised all of Ukraine, denazification and demilitarization, and now the Kremlin is negotiating with those whom, as it itself claimed, do not even exist.
So let me start by saying that modern Ukraine was created entirely and completely by Russia. More precisely by Bolshevik Communist Russia. As a result of Bolshevik policies, Soviet Ukraine emerged, which to this day can quite rightfully be called Ukraine, named after Vladimir Ilyich Lenin.
The Z supporters accuse Putin of having sold out to the treacherous West and of failing to achieve a single goal in Ukraine while sacrificing hundreds of thousands of Russians. The terrorist Pavel Gubarev, the big-headed guy who helped build a Russian paradise in Donbas 7, claimed that, according to his calculations, Russia has lost about 1 million people killed in Ukraine. This figure even exceeds the official data from the Ukrainian General Staff. Gubarev openly mocks the successes of the Russian army. The price of these successes is high. By my estimate, more than 1 million of our servicemen have been killed, which looks more like mass slaughter than tactical, let alone strategic, successes.
They will start howling about betrayal. And in fact, Pavel Gubarev has already started this howling. If he had any brains, he would have thought about this back in 2014, the people's governor, you know. Wasn't it obvious what kind of thugs were carrying out orders alongside the Gherkin? There, I don't even remember the name anymore. Ponomarev or something like that was there. These were, on the one hand, victims of a mental abortion carried out by the Soviet system, and on the other hand, the fuel for this very war.
Looks like Pashka has become disillusioned with the Russian world. Turns out, the Russian spring smells like rotting Russians. That's why Gubarev won't back down and calls on the military, after the truce, not to surrender their weapons, but to go and overthrow the Tsar. He calls Putin's regime criminal, saying it does more harm to Russia than Ukraine and NATO combined.
It's a twist!
It's funny that the Kremlin created Gubarev so he would stage an armed coup in Donbas. And now this professional arsonist is preparing a coup in Moscow. Karma in the color of the St. George ribbon.
Ironic.
Gubarev was also supported by his fellow terrorist, Gherkin Strelkov. Right now, he's actually serving time for criticizing the Kremlin authorities. The convict Novoros paints terrifying pictures. He is convinced that Russia is on the verge of military defeat and that the current Kremlin authorities are incapable of fixing the situation. Moreover, the unthinkable has happened. Against the backdrop of criticizing Putin, Strelkov is praising the president of Ukraine. Quote, "Our enemy is by no means stupid, including Zelensky himself and his advisors. That's a fact."
What is this? They've completely lost their minds.
The Z supporters have become more active. They're demanding blood. More precisely, they're demanding that someone be held responsible for the blood they've shed. And the scapegoat is obvious to them.
They made a bunch of mistakes and now they don't know what to do, so they're looking for someone to blame.
An important turning point has occurred. Putin is no longer a sacred figure. Previously, it was customary to criticize the boyars, but not touch the Tsar, as if he was just being led by the nose and constantly deceived.
They tricked him, just absolutely blatantly lied to him.
But now the image of the Tsar is tarnished. Putin, with his imperial ambitions, has become ridiculous and pathetic. Russian ultra-patriots now openly consider him a weak leader, which means he should be thrown into the pit with the old and unattractive dictators.
Now Putin has shown that he is in fact Putin is a huge plastic balloon inflated over these more than 20 years. No, well, Putin is supposed to be a great geopolitical strategist, a wise, cunning leader, and so on. And now, all of this has revealed that in reality, Putin is not like that at all. In fact, Putin is this, may not sound very nice, and it's even insulting to Malkish Blokish, because at least Malkish Blokish was still a boy of some sort. But this is just some kind of Kremlin creature.
Russia is on the brink of revolution. All the ingredients for this dish are ready. A drawn-out slaughter at the front with no results, an economy on the verge of default, a demoralized population, a Tsar weaker than ever, and a society pumped full of hatred and weapons. All that's left is to season it with some kind of Prigozhin too, and there you have Othello to the new Russia of the future, or whatever is left of it. The collapse of this pseudo-empire is inevitable. The only question is when this dish will be served at the table of history.
So, who were you for Prigozhin or Putin when Wagner was marching on Moscow?
I was for Prigozhin.
So now you've betrayed Prigozhin and Wagner, is that right? And now you serve Putin?
Yes.
I see. That is, you have no honor at all. There is no conscience. These concepts do not exist, right?
I don't have that.
You don't. I see. So you betray anyone, is that right?
For money, yes, absolutely.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.